Chapter 2279, Meteor Burst. Banshee narrowed his eyes, unwilling to let Liang Yu close in further. His weapon's strength lay in mid to long-range combat, not close quarters. This pair of crescent blades, nearly as large as his own frame, proved cumbersome for maneuvering at such close range. "Get the hell out of here." The chain whirling at breakneck speed in his hand shot toward the storm. At such high velocity, he was certain Liang Yu couldn't evade it. Even if she could dodge, the rhythm of her spinning would surely be disrupted. Whoosh, the chain plunged into the storm. Liang Yu's eyes narrowed as a terrifying burst of energy erupted from the chain. Meteor blast. Banshee's ki energy surged along the chain, triggering a devastating ki explosion within the storm. Yet Liang Yu's form twisted like a boneless creature, dodging the blast radius before spinning onward like a nimble fox. This time, she appeared at Banshee's right flank. His rear was precisely where Banshee focused his defense. Being right-handed, he instinctively prioritized guarding his left side. Yet at this moment, his sword-wielding right hand was ill-suited to parry an attack from the right flank. Liang Yu finally launched her assault. Close enough, a powerful surge of energy suddenly slammed toward Banshee. Boom! Black energy pecanned toward him. Banshee instantly sensed the enemy's assault. Though the attack was incredibly fierce, his martial prowess was no joke either. His body twisted violently. The massive crescent blade in his right hand was awkward to swing now, so he simply used it as a shield, holding it up in front of him. The force of the strike slammed into the crescent blade. The immense impact sent Banshee staggering back 2 steps before he could absorb all the momentum. Liang Yu had already closed the distance, both copper hammers swinging down toward Banshee's torso. At this moment, one of Banshee's chains was flung out, temporarily beyond his reach. He now faced Liang Yu's close-quarters assault head-on. His only option was to block with his single sword. Ha! Liang Yu's hammer slammed viciously into Banshee, only to be blocked by the massive crescent blade. Yet the sheer force of the strike pressed heavily against Banshee. This female human possesses tremendous strength. Though he felt a hint of pressure, Banshee felt no fear, only surprise. As a lizard man, his strength naturally surpassed that of humans, so he wasn't afraid of a direct clash with Liang Yu. Liang Yu seized the initiative, her 2 copper hammers raining down like a storm. Blocking 2 copper hammers with a single crescent blade proved extremely taxing for Banshee. Even if he drew back the other crescent blade, wielding such a large sword against Liang Yu's attacks offered no advantage whatsoever. After all, in terms of stature, Liang Yu was less than half his height. This close-quarters combat felt like a powerful monkey had climbed onto a human, clawing wildly at you, yet those sharp monkey claws could easily take your life. What a terrifying human! Banshee thought to himself. But at that very moment, a shrill cry for help erupted from his communication device. "Someone, help the Emperor! His Majesty! His Majesty has been killed." Hearing this news, even Banshee's iron will froze, his mind going blank. As commander of the Royal Guard, protecting the imperial family was his paramount duty. Yet now, the Emperor had been slain? That doll-like female human had ascended the steps less than 5 minutes ago. How could the battle already be over? Where was the armor of the end? Why hadn't it activated? He had clearly sensed that chilling aura. Banshee's mind went completely blank. In a clash between masters, losing focus was an extremely fatal mistake. That very instant gave Liang Yu her opening. His heart wavered, and his grip on the sword faltered. Liang Yu's arms surged with power as she swung both copper hammers with all her might. A clanging sound rang out as the massive crescent blade flew from Banshee's grasp. Ha! Liang Yu roared, swinging the copper hammers straight at his body. Banshee wore heavy armor, and copper hammers were weapons designed to pierce armor. They didn't need to strike the head, hitting any part of the body would shatter flesh and bone, inflicting severe injury. Banshee finally regained his wits. Seeing Liang Yu's hammer descending, he forced himself to temporarily block out all other thoughts. He knew the woman before him was immensely powerful, not someone to be easily defeated. He simply discarded his chain sword and raised both arms. Heavy armored gauntlets covered his forearms. Facing Liang Yu's hammer, he spread his arms wide like a goalkeeper catching a football and caught both hammers directly with his hands. Bang! Both copper hammers were seized in Banqi's palms. Liang Yu distinctly heard the crack of shattering metal. The armor plating on Banqi's palms and his own hand bones were shattered by the impact. Green blood dripped down steadily, yet Liang Yu felt his hammers clamped fast as if by some unyielding force, impossible to pull free. Banqi fixed Liang Yu with a deathly stare. Meteor blast. A torrent of force erupted from his palms, surging toward Liang Yu like a terrifying nuclear bomb detonating. A colossal shockwave swept through the streets, obliterating everything in its path for several blocks. Yet a figure as swift as a cheetah glided down from the sky. Liang Yu landed on the ground, not a single scratch on her body. What terrifying power! Her eyes, sharp as swords, uttered this in awe. But now that I know your ability, close-range explosive key, how could I not be prepared? She had indeed planned to trade blows, but only if her attack could incapacitate Banqi. That would make it worthwhile. After a brief pause, Liang Yu looked at her empty hands. The copper hammer had been exchanged for her injuries. She needed a new weapon. Engaging in bare-knuckle combat was impossible. Close contact would allow his meteor burst to inflict maximum damage through physical contact. Liang Yu reopened her weapon case. This time, she drew a compact folding crossbow. Guns were never an option for her. As an enhancement martial artist, only cold weapons could maximize her power. A compact, exquisitely crafted compound bow, its entire frame forged from metal, demanded terrifying strength just to draw. After Liu Karen's modifications, its destructive potential surged tenfold. The compound bow, the pinnacle of cold weaponry. Liang Yu raised the bow, then retrieved a quiver of 10 short arrows from the holster. Chapter 2280, Meteor Burst, Part 2. She swiftly drew and knocked an arrow, channeling immense energy into both bow and bolt. A terrifying force surged around her like a raging storm. Snap! The bowstring snapped taut, drawn to its fullest arc. The greatest advantage of a compound bow was its ability to generate maximum lethal force with minimal physical exertion. However, to accommodate Liang Yu's physical strength, Liu Karen had made special modifications to it. Without exaggeration, when Liang Yu drew this bow to its full extent, the extremely expensive arrows forged from metal could pierce through 30 meters of steel plate. This was purely in terms of raw power. If one factored in the force of his breath, shattering the walls of a district capital city of level 10 would be no challenge at all. Banqi sensed the opponent's arrow poised to strike and couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. He didn't carry nearly as many weapons as his opponent. After all, a 10-skilled weapon master like Liang Yu was a rare sight. Having discarded his chain scimitar, he now only had his military sword and the battle armor he wore, a suit whose level rivaled silver armor. Yet he sensed that relying solely on armor to defend against her arrows would be foolish. So Banqi drew the short sword from his waist. Though called a short sword, its length far exceeded Liang Yu's arm. Liang Yu had already entered a state of unity with heaven and earth, her perception of the surrounding world reaching an ethereal clarity. Not even the slightest change could escape her notice. Her heart held no fear, ensuring her hands remained steady when she struck, unaffected by emotional fluctuations. Moreover, the entire battle situation of the Wulwan Empire currently favored their side. Snap snap, her compound bow was drawn to its absolute limit. Liang Yu's stance was exquisitely graceful, legs spread shoulder-width apart, arms taut yet supple. Fixing her gaze on Banqi's eyes, she released the arrow with a swift flick of her wrist. Boom! The arrow's speed sliced through the air like a cannon blast, thunderous and deafening. Its supersonic velocity instantly evacuated the surrounding air, carving a vacuum-like cylindrical path. The arrow was too fast, so fast that neither Liang Yu nor Banqi could follow its trajectory with the naked eye. As elite warriors, they could only rely on instinct and the faint afterimage to gauge its direction and flight path. Banshee held his short sword before him with his right hand, striving to remain calm in the face of this assault. At the critical moment, his thick arm swung back. Clang! 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 The blade of the short sword met the arrowhead with pinpoint accuracy, producing an excruciatingly sharp metallic screech. In terms of raw strength, Banshee actually surpassed Liang Yu. Though he felt the crushing force of the super compound bow upon contact, Banshee managed to withstand it. Yet the razor-sharp arrow slammed into the sword, producing a relentless clack sound, like a rat gnawing at a table leg. A sudden chill gripped Banshee's heart as an ominous foreboding washed over him. In the blink of an eye, everything unfolded. He strained to flick the arrow away, but then, snap, his sword shattered. Cleaved clean through the middle by the arrow, fragments flew everywhere. Banshee's pupils contracted sharply, unable to believe what he saw. That slender arrow, a short dart by human standards, was barely finger-length to his massive frame. Yet this diminutive projectile had shattered his sword. His weapon was crafted from the Wulwan Empire's finest military-grade materials. How could it be so fragile? What he didn't know was that Liang Yu's arsenal was the most comprehensive, and these cold weapons were the ones Liu Karen had poured his utmost dedication into. Each piece was forged from the latest E-metal alloy. Infused with mechanical civilization's technology, few known materials in the present world could surpass its toughness. These 10 arrows were exorbitantly expensive, supremely rare super arrows. Banshee's misjudgment of the weapon during the clash shattered his dagger cleanly. Though the arrows veered slightly off course, they still hurtled toward his body. Stunned, Banshee scrambled to dodge. Fortunately, the sword had absorbed most of the arrow's force. Though they passed mere inches before him, he managed to evade them. Yet Liang Yu seemed to have anticipated everything, already drawing a new arrow and firing it. Not just one, but a volley of arrows. The compound bow greatly reduced the strain of drawing and releasing, enabling rapid, consecutive shots. Liang Yu held nothing back, unleashing 5 arrows in a single breath. With no weapon in hand, Banshee could only choose to dodge awkwardly. Gah! A roar erupted from his throat as his legs tensed violently, unleashing tremendous power that propelled him forward at blinding speed. The arrow's force was too overwhelming for him to meet head-on. He could only dodge or attempt to slap the arrow's sides with his palms. Even so, evading all 5 arrows in rapid succession proved nearly impossible. One small arrow plunged deep into his shoulder, effortlessly piercing through his chest armor and burying itself in his flesh. Though diminutive, the arrow carried Liang Yu's chi force, exploding like a poisonous bullet and shattering half his shoulder. Humph! Banshee grunted, clutching his shoulder in agony as he retreated, simultaneously injecting himself with medication. Liang Yu wouldn't let such an opportunity slip. This time, her weapon changed again, a 9-section whip. Against such a ferocious beast, a flexible weapon proved far more suitable. In a brute force clash, Liang Yu held no advantage. She closed the distance, giving Banshee no chance to recover. She launched an unrelenting barrage of attacks. The whip created distance between them, and timing the meteor explosion technique was crucial. Yet this whip was like a cunning viper, its complexity far surpassed that of his chain sword. The lizard man, blessed with immense physical strength, seemed less adept at mastering a weapon's versatility and more inclined toward brute force. This approach wasn't inherently flawed. But when the disparity in raw strength was negligible, the gap in technique became starkly apparent. Liang Yu continued circling Banshee at high speed with her 8 trigrams evasive palm, striking unexpectedly with the 9-section whip. Her attacks were utterly unpredictable, fluid and ever-shifting, making their trajectories impossible to anticipate. Soon, Banshee bore over a dozen new wounds. The pain in his left shoulder hadn't fully subsided, and a lingering worry about the Emperor's death gnawed at his heart. No, this can't continue. Even if His Majesty fell in battle, the Grand Commander still lives. I cannot abandon hope. I must eliminate this woman swiftly and launch a counterattack. Chapter 2281, the inevitable outcome. Banshee realized that in terms of agility and weapon mastery, he was vastly outmatched by this diminutive human woman. But his advantage lay in his massive frame and raw strength. A fierce resolve ignited within Banshee. Whoosh! As the 9-section whip struck again from behind, he spun violently. Liang Yu assumed he intended to evade the whip's strike before countering. But she was wrong. Banshee turned, utterly disregarding the whip's barbed tip piercing his own flesh. He locked onto Liang Yu's position along the whip's trajectory. Thus, he allowed the weapon to plunge into his chest cavity before launching himself toward Liang Yu with outstretched arms. Thud! The whip pierced Banshee's body, but he braced his muscles to clamp it shut, preventing further penetration. He crashed toward Liang Yu like an iron tower. Now, Liang Yu faced a choice: abandon her weapon and flee, or continue the close-quarters fight. But the weapons in her holster were nearly depleted. She now possessed only this 9-section whip and a dragon's roar longsword. Without her weapons, she would be at a disadvantage against Banshee. This bastard! Liang Yu suddenly realized his intent, to force her to abandon her weapons through sheer physical might. Unarmed combat was impossible. With that realization, Liang Yu's resolve hardened. She unleashed her inner energy, channeling it through the 9-section whip to pierce deep into Banshee's body. The spikes already embedded in his chest drilled even further inward. Blood spilled from Banshee's mouth. Yet he wore an expression of utter indifference. It doesn't matter. Your whip is thin and long, like a strand of hair. Even if it pierces my internal organs, it won't be fatal. But before that happens, I'll grab you and crush you to pieces. His massive hands were like a prison cage. Once he seized Liang Yu, his overwhelming strength ensured she'd be unable to escape. Then, with Liang Yu as his plaything, he'd unleash the meteor explosion, using his absolute, overwhelming force to crush her completely. Liang Yu's eyebrows shot up like daggers. He was gambling with his life, betting his defense was strong enough to kill her before her 9-section whip destroyed his body. But Liang Yu had never feared death. As a martial artist, courage was essential. If he intended to fight to the death, she would see it through to the end. Ha! Liang Yu abandoned any thought of escape, pouring every ounce of strength into her 9-section whip. Pfft! The whip sank deep into Banshee's body once more, blood gushing from the corner of his mouth like a fountain. Yet his face twisted into a savage grimace, the pain only fueled his ferocity. Neither bothered with defense, both determined to finish the other off. Their bodies closed in at breakneck speed. Liang Yu seemed oblivious to Banshee's massive hands closing in. The 9-section whip, like a venomous dragon, continued to pierce Banshee's flesh. Simultaneously, Banshee's enormous palms snapped together mid-air, forming a steel cage that slowly encircled Liang Yu. Thud! The whip had penetrated deep, tearing through Banshee's muscles and sternum, driving straight toward his internal organs. Meanwhile, Banshee's hands had completely trapped Liang Yu, forming an inescapable cage. A sinister curve spread across Banshee's face. "Want to take me down with you? You're far too naive." He roared furiously, his hands suddenly surging with power. Galaxy Starburst. In that instant, he unleashed the most powerful strike of his life. Facing a life-or-death crisis, he broke through his own limitations. This strike surpassed every battle he had ever fought. White light rapidly coalesced and erupted from his palms, its terrifying might making it feel as if a reaper of love resided within his hands. He clutched his palms tightly, refusing to let even a shred of this power escape. Even if his hands were blown off, he would use this strike to utterly kill the woman before him. The explosion sound was tightly sealed by his hands, forcibly confined within a single space. Clang! The 9-section whip accelerated suddenly, twisting within his chest like a venomous snake as its barbed tip drove straight toward his heart. Thud! The massive heart was pierced clean through by the whip. Guh! A torrent of blood spurted from Banshee's mouth. The excruciating pain in his heart made him realize what had happened, but for a lizard man with such formidable vitality, this was not a fatal wound. Lizard men possessed immense vitality by nature, and Banshee, a black chariot-level enhanced human, was no exception. Unless his heart was completely shredded, he simply couldn't be killed. Yet such an injury was far from inconsequential, drastically impairing his bodily functions. That was assuming his opponent wouldn't continue targeting his heart. He was utterly certain the woman in his palm was dead, most likely reduced to ashes by an overwhelming blast of chi. But in the next instant, his confidence turned to terror and bewilderment. For that 9-section whip erupted with an overwhelming surge of energy, shattering his heart clean through. That massive heart exploded with a wet thud, pulverized as thoroughly as a smashed watermelon. How could this be? Banshee refused to believe this reality. He slowly spread his hands, only to discover the expected sight of Liang Yu reduced to ashes was nowhere to be seen. She stood in her jet-black armor, coldly glaring at Banshee. The demon god armor, everyone gets their share. Banshee's massive frame crashed to the ground, radiating fierce resentment. Yet victory and defeat were always this cruel. Battles between enhancement mutants were invariably fought to the death. Liang Yu raised a hand, and a long, 9-section whip emerged from her body. She walked silently before Banshee, reaching out to extract the mutant origin from his forehead bone. Gazing at this formidable abnormal, though he was of a different race, Liang Yu accorded him the respect due to a warrior. This battle favored my weaponry. Otherwise, we likely would have ended in mutual destruction. Each fought for their master. There was little else to say. Liang Yu walked over and, astonishingly, hoisted the massive body onto her shoulder. Epsilon-level enemies, once slain, could not be disposed of carelessly. Their corpses were vital strategic resources. They could be studied or sent to Zhou Qir and Deng Shentong's biological labs for human augmentation experiments. With that, the battle against the alien beings on the ground was finally over. The fall of the Wulwan Empire was inevitable. War raged everywhere as the Huashu Kingdom forces conducted a thorough sweep, eliminating every last lizard man remnant.